Hello everyone and welcome to this video of our Python tutorial series. In our previous video, we completed if-else in Python. And in this video, we will be moving forward with while loops. First of all, what are loops? A loop can be considered as an endless cycle of anything. Let's take an example that if I play any playlist in loop, which means that the playlist will continue to play again and again and again and again from starting. Whenever the playlist ends, it will begin again from the starting. Similarly, in programming, loops are the same. If we want to repeat any particular code for a number of times, we use loops. Let's check this flowchart of while loop. This is the basic algorithm of while loop and this is the flowchart of while loop. What it specifies is, this is here our loop begins, and once the loop is begun, we go to a condition A. This here is a condition and checks if the condition is satisfied, that is the condition is true, or it is not satisfied, that is the condition is false. If the condition is false, we go out of the loop, and if the condition is true, we perform operations B. Here B is a block of code or any operations that we want to perform whenever the condition A is true. And once all the commands in B are executed, we move back to the condition and checks again if our condition is satisfied or not. This whole cycle of condition being satisfied and the commands of B being executed is called a complete iteration. Once a single iteration is completed, the compiler will check if the condition A is satisfied again or not. If it's satisfied again, it will move back to B, and if it is not satisfied in the second iteration, it will end the loop. This here defines the end of the loop. So in short, whenever a given condition is satisfied, certain operations are performed until the condition is not satisfied. So it doesn't matter if there are 100 iterations, 1000 iterations, or even infinite iterations. If the condition is always true, we will never get out of our loop. This particular situation, when we cannot get out of our loop, is called an endless loop. And whenever an endless loop is executed, our program will fail. We will have no control over our program because it will not move beyond this set of command and execute any other command, because this condition is always true, which is why it cannot get out of the loop here. Because if this condition is always true, we will never get out of our loop and the rest of the program will not be executed, which is somewhere here. Now let's initialize a variable called, let's say, A with 0, and let's use while loop. How to declare a while loop? It is pretty simple. Just use the word while and we have to give the condition along with it. Let's say while A is less than 10, and now I have to write a block of code, so I will have to put colon, and when I press enter, I know that I am specifying a block of code for while loop, so I have to indent my code. Let's say print A. Now if you see carefully, if we do not perform any operation on A, our A will always be 0 because we have never updated our A. If I will run this code will contain an endless loop because this condition will always be true because our A will always be 0. Let's try running our endless loop here now. Python 3 while loop .py. Now as you can see, my program will never end. I'll have to manually end it by pressing Ctrl Z. It clearly specifies that I'll have to update the value of A for this situation to be false in future. So if I just add 1 for each iteration in our loop, so whenever we will be in our first iteration, I know that first this print command will be executed, which will print 0 in our first iteration, and then this command will be executed, A plus equals to 1, which will update our value of A by adding 1 to it. So for first iteration, once this command is executed, our A will be 1. Now A less than 10 condition is checked again for our second iteration and our A is 1. So this condition stands true. We will get inside the loop. So print A will be executed, which will print 1. Then an updation is there, which will make A as 2. Condition will again be checked, and so on and so on and so on. Once our value of A is 9, this condition will stand true it will print A, which is 9, and then 1 is added to 9, which will make it 10. And now if we check this condition here, A less than 10, the value of A is 10. This makes the condition false. So the compiler will leave the loop and come out loop ended. Let's run our code again. First iteration 0 is printed, second iteration 1 is printed, and in the 10th iteration 9 is printed, and on 11th iteration this condition is false. This condition is not satisfied. That is why our compiler comes out of the loop and executes this command right here. So this is how while loops work. Now let's print only odd numbers from 0 to 10. So I'll have to put a condition here because we only have to print odd numbers. I'll have to use if a modulus 2 equals to 1. Now what is this percentage sign? This percentage sign is a modulus operation. So what a percentile 2 will do is it will divide a with 2, and whatever the remainder of that division will be is returned. So we know that whenever odd number is divided by 2, it will leave 1 as a remainder. So if a modulus 2 equal to 1, we know that number will be odd. So we print our number a. Now whenever our number is not odd, we do not have to perform any operation. There is no need to put else. So we won't be putting any else in this if else condition. And now I know that I will have to update a as well. Now let's run the code again. We got 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 and loop ended. Now let's add a custom complication in our code in which we do not have to print the numbers that are divisible by 5. I know that I will have to give the command for this condition check. We will have to give the command for this condition check before this block of code because we don't want a to be printed. So we want to add another condition check before that. If a percentile 5 equals to 0, which means that it is truly divisible by 5, we don't want to perform any operation in that case. What we will do in this case is just put a continue here. Continue is a keyword which means that you do not have to perform any of the below mentioned code in this loop for this iteration. Whenever continue is called, the compiler will skip the code beyond the continue command and just move on to the next iteration, which means that whenever continue is encountered, the compiler will ignore all this block of code and move on to condition check directly. The compiler will ignore all the code here. Let's try to run this code. As you can see, we are not getting any output and our terminal is just blinking. So definitely there is some issue or there is some problem. What the problem can be? Now, as I told you that the compiler will skip all the below mentioned code in that block of code whenever continue will be encountered, which means that once continue is encountered, this line of code will never be executed. And if this line of code will never be executed, this statement will always stand true. And only this condition will be true for the rest of the program life. We have to perform an increment operation here before continue. So if I just exit from this code and do this, we got exactly what we desired for. We got all the odd numbers except for the multiples of 5. Now there is another command called as break, which is similar to continue, but what break does is it forcibly exits the loop, which means that it doesn't matter if the condition is satisfied for our next iteration or not. The break command will forcibly exit the code and continue to execute the code beyond the loop code. So if I put break instead of continue here, what will happen is this loop will be terminated whenever a will reach 5. Let's try to run this. We got loop ended. Let's create a program in which we will continue to accept the values from user until a user enters a certain specific value. Let's say we want user to enter a pin, and until the user enters correct pin, we will continue to take input from the user for correct pin. We know that we will always have to continue to take the correct pin until the user enters the correct pin. We know that we will continue to get inputs from the user until the correct pin is encountered. So this condition will not be useful for us in this case. In this case, we will have to use condition which will always be true, which is we can use 1 equals to 1 or true or just 1 here. Let's go with while 1. While 1 is usually used for such conditions where we have to manually terminate the loop, otherwise we will have to continue to run the loop for endless time. While 1 is most of the time used. Until now we just use print commands. We don't know how to take input from the users. We have a function for that. Let's say we will store the value of our input in A. The function is input and we can pass the value which you want to display in the parameter. Let's say enter the pin. By default, the input function treats the value entered by the user as string. In this case, we will need integer pins, so I can just convert the input value into int directly, and we have already performed type conversion in our previous videos. So if you are shocked to see what's going on, you can refer to the previous videos. This statement will store a user input and convert it to integer and then store it to A. Let's say my pin is 1000, so I will have to check if the value entered by user is my correct pin or not, and if it is a correct pin, we will have to break out of the loop. And if it is not correct, in every other case, we will have to print that pin is incorrect. Only when the correct pin is entered, we will get out of the loop. So whenever the correct pin is entered, the first thing we want to do is print a message for success. Let's try to run this code again and see what happens. Here it is asking me enter the pin. Let's enter 200. I got pin is incorrect. And it's asking me again enter the pin. Let's put 100. Pin is incorrect. Enter the pin. 500. Pin is incorrect. Enter the pin. 2000. Enter the pin again. And if I input my value 1000, I got success and my program execution is finished. Continue and break commands will come in handy once we start to develop some good programs in Python. So try experimenting with break and continue, and experiment with while, and try to combine multiple statements just the way we did in if else with and or. Experiment with the code as much as you can. If you get any error, try to understand what that error says and what that error means. If you can decode it, that is just perfect, and if you cannot, just leave that on comments. I will respond to you as soon as possible. So that will be all for this video. If you learned something new from this video, like this video, subscribe to the channel and share it with your fellow learners. If you are stuck somewhere or have any query, just leave it on the comments. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time.